Hello. We're going to be reading a Roman myth today. Now, we are starting our history unit on ancient Rome, which is a really enjoyable one. And I know that you've read a lot of Greek mythology last year, as you were also learning about ancient Greece, if you're at this school in second grade. So this year, we'll be reading some Roman mythology, and we'll read about one a week. Sometimes it'll be a little bit more than that. But I think that you're really going to enjoy these stories. So a lot of the Roman mythology comes from the Greek. So you'll see some of the characters are even the same, and we'll talk about that when that's the case. Sometimes the names have changed, but the gods and goddesses themselves are the same. So today we're going to be reading a story about Damon and Pythias, are their names. And I am not going to be able to show you all the pages on the screen like we usually do, but I am going to present a little slideshow to go over this story. So just a moment. So that you're at least able to see like the names of the characters. Okay. Oops, let me find the correct one. And it's from another story we're going to be reading about. But here is Damon and Pythias. Okay. So Damon, that's the way we would pronounce it, and Pythias. And we're also going to be hearing about Dionysius is the way we say his name, Dionysius, who is the tyrant of Syracuse and cruel king of Sicily. And Sicily is a large island that lies just off the toe of Italy. So I'm going to pull that up on a map for you to see as well, because that is where our story takes place today. Okay, so here are some images of what Sicily looks like, but here it is on a map. So this is the whole country of Italy. So it's broken up, as you can see, into these little regions like a state. But we are going to be learning about, ancient Rome, which started in the city of Rome in Italy, but it expanded outside of that. So as we'll learn about in history, the Roman Empire included most of Europe at its largest point, and also some of Northern Africa and parts of Asia that were close to Europe. So this is where our story takes place today with the king of Sicily. Let me go back to our slideshow though. Okay. So Damon and Pythias. And you do not have to take these notes. These are just some interesting extra thoughts on Damon and Pythias. Okay. Now Damon and Pythias were two noble young men who lived on the island of Sicily in a city called Syracuse. And let me go back to just this one for now. They were such close companions and were so devoted to each other that all the people of the city admired them as the highest examples of true friendship. Each trusted the other so completely that nobody could ever have persuaded one that the other had been unfaithful or dishonest, even if that had been the case. Do any of you have a best friend like that who you would trust no matter what? Now, it happened that Syracuse, the city in Sicily, was at that time ruled by a famous tyrant named Dionysius, who had gained the throne for himself through treachery, and who from then on flaunted his power by behaving cruelly to his own subjects and to all strangers and enemies who were so unfortunate as to fall into his clutches. Now, this tyrant, Dionysius, was so unjustly cruel that once, when he awoke from a restless sleep during which he dreamt that a certain man in the town had attempted to kill him, he immediately had that man put to death, just from a dream. Now, it happened that Pythias had, quite unjustly, been accused by Dionysius of trying to overthrow him. And for this supposed crime of treason, treason means to go against a king or someone in charge, Pythias was sentenced by the king to die. Try as he might, Pythias could not prove his innocence to the king's satisfaction. And so, all hope now lost, the noble youth asked only for a few days' freedom so that he could settle his business affairs and see to it that his relatives would be cared for after he was executed. So he is sure he's going to be killed. Now, Dionysius, the hard-hearted tyrant, however, would not believe Pythias's promise to return, and would not allow him to leave unless he left behind him a hostage, someone who would be put to death in his place if he should fail to return within the stated time. Now that is a big request on someone, because what if Pythias actually doesn't return? This person would actually die in Pythias's place. That's a huge sacrifice. Now, who do you think Pythias might call upon to take his place? Now, Pythias immediately thought of his friend Damon, and he unhesitatingly sent for him in this hour of dire necessity, never thinking for a moment that his trusty companion would refuse his request. Nor did he, for Damon hastened straightway to the palace, much to the amazement of King Dionysius, and gladly offered to be held hostage for his friend, in spite of the dangerous condition that had been attached to the favor. That is one amazing friend, isn't it? Friend who is willing to give up their life for the other. Now, Pythias does intend to return, but Damon could die because Pythias isn't able to get back for some reason. So he's putting himself in a very dangerous position. Therefore, Pythias was permitted to settle his earthly affairs before departing to the land of the shades, while Damon remained behind in the dungeon, the captive of the tyrant Dionysius. After Pythias had been released, Dionysius asked Damon if he did not feel afraid, for Pythias might very well take advantage of the opportunity he had been given and simply not return at all. And then he, Damon, would be executed in his place. But Damon replied at once with a willing smile. There is no need for me to feel afraid, O king, since I have a perfect faith in the word of my true friend. And I know that he will certainly return before the appointed time. Unless, of course, he dies or is held captive by some evil force. Even so, even should the noble Pythias be captured and held against his will, it would be an honor for me to die in his place. Such devotion and perfect faith as this was unheard of for the friendless tyrant. Still, though, he could not help admiring the true nobility of his captive. He nevertheless determined that Damon should certainly be put to death should Pythias not return by the appointed time. So there's part of Dionysius that's thinking, wow, what a great friendship. I've never had anything like that before. But he still thinks he's going to kill him regardless. And as the fates would have it, by a strange turn of events, Pythias was detained far longer in his task than he had imagined. Though he never for a single minute intended to evade the sentence of death to which he had been so unjustly committed, Pythias met with several accidents and unavoidable delays. Now his time was running out, and he had yet to overcome the many impediments that had been placed in his path. At last, he succeeded in clearing away all the hindrances, and he sped back the many miles to the palace of the king, his heart almost bursting with grief and fear that he might arrive too late. Meanwhile, when the last day of the allotted time arrived, Dionysius commanded that the place of execution should be readied at once, since he was still ruthlessly determined that if one of his victims escaped him, the other should not. And so, entering the chamber in which Damon was confined, he began to utter words of sarcastic pity for the foolish faith, as he termed it, that the young man of Syracuse had been his friend. In reply, however, Damon merely smiled. He's not angry at his friend. Since, in spite of the fact that the 11th hour had already arrived, and the 11th hour is a term which means that it is like at the very last possible moment, he still believed that his lifelong companion would not fail him. Even when, a short time later, he was actually led out to the side of his execution, his serenity remained the same. Great excitement stirred the crowd that had gathered to witness the execution, for all the people had heard of the bargain that had been struck between the two friends. There was much sobbing, and cries of sympathy were heard all around as the captive was brought out, though he himself somehow retained complete composure, even at this moment of darkest danger. It is wonderful that he has such faith in his friend that even at this time, he's not angry. Now, presently, the excitement grew more intense still as a swift runner could be seen approaching the palace courtyard at an astonishing speed. And wild shrieks of relief and joy went up as Pythias, breathless and exhausted, rushed headlong through the crowd and flung himself into the arms of his beloved friend, sobbing with relief that he had, by the grace of the gods, arrived in time to save Damon's life. This final exhibition of devoted love and faithfulness was more than even the stony heart of Dionysius, the tyrant, could resist. As the throng of spectators melted into tears at the companion's embrace, the king approached the pair and declared that Pythias was hereby pardoned, which means he wasn't going to be killed anymore, and his death sentence canceled. In addition, he begged the pair to allow him to become their friend, to try to be as much a friend to them both as they had shown each other to be. That is so sweet, isn't it? Thus did the two friends of Syracuse, by the faithful love they bore to each other, conquer the hard heart of a tyrant king. And in the annals of true friendship, there are no more honored names than those of Damon and Pythias. For no person can do more than be willing to lay down his life for the sake of his friend. Great line. Now, Damon and Pythias, here's an extra little note, were the closest of companions. And that word companion is a word that comes from the ancient idea that the sharing of food is the basis for friendship. The combination of the Latin words cum, which means with, and panis, which means bread. So it's with bread is that word companion. Gives us the sense that a companion is someone who eats bread with us. Similarly, when we invite friends over for an evening, perhaps to share our food, we say that they are our company. The word accompany attaches the Latin prefix for to onto cum and panis. Originally, this word meant to go along with someone and share bread together. So that's just a little background about the Latin. Occasionally we'll have that. Now, for Damon and Pythias, there's just a little information that the heroes are Damon and Pythias. The villain is Dionysius, even though he does change his heart at the end. And in many Roman myths, there are specific tasks and reward. And the heroes and villains, similar to what we were talking about with Arabian Nights and folk literature in general, usually there's very clear heroes and villains. Now, the task that was in this Roman myth is that Damon must wait faithfully as captive until Pythias's return, and the reward is that both end up being pardoned and the softened heart of King Dionysius. The lesson here is to be a faithful friend, especially with this quote, "No person can do more than be willing to lay down his life for the sake of a friend." And here is the Latin that it was described. Cum is a Latin word which means with, and panis means bread. So company comes from that, and companion as well. Okay, well, that is all for today. We're going to continue reading some wonderful myths from Roman mythology throughout the coming couple months as we continue to study ancient Rome. And I hope you will enjoy this one and others as well. See you later. Bye.